The room was packed, the atmosphere permeated by the muffled sound of loud music and fake laughter. I never liked these company parties, but tonight was going to be different. Something was burning inside me, a discomfort I couldn't ignore. The last-minute invitation, the distant look on her face as she left the house, her evasive answers over the previous weeks. Everything pointed to something I refused to admit. But there I was, crossing the hall, my gaze searching among the shadows illuminated by colored lights. And that's when I saw her. She had her back to me, laughing, gesturing with a glass of wine in her hand. Next to her, a man. Her laughter, which had once warmed me, now sounded cruel, cutting. He leaned close to her, whispering something in her ear. I saw the light touch on his arm, a casual gesture, but too intimate to ignore. I felt my stomach turn. I didn't know if I wanted to confront them there, in the middle of everyone, or just walk away and pretend it never happened. I took a step back, trying to catch my breath. It was then that the scene changed. The lights dimmed, and everyone turned to the big screen in the center of the hall. A company presentation was about to begin. It was announced as a tribute to the team's achievements over the year. I couldn't concentrate on the master of ceremonies' words, my attention still locked on that corner of the hall. Until the first image appeared. It was a video. At first, it looked like a promotional clip, smiles, moments of teamwork. But then something changed. Her face appeared, laughing, but in a context that wasn't that of the company. It was amateur footage, shaky, of an intimate dinner. My heart raced and the room fell into a sepulchral silence. It was her, but not me. The man next to her, the one I had just seen, was now holding her hand under the table, his complicit smile like a knife turning slowly in my chest. The video continued, exposing moments of a relationship I never knew existed. The wine he poured for her. The touch of his fingers on her cheek. The stolen kiss at the end of a night. A murmur began to grow among the colleagues, a whirlwind of voices that couldn't be contained. The only thing more deafening than that hubbub was the sound of my own heart hammering in my ears. I looked at her, now standing in the corner of the hall, her face pale, her eyes wide as if searching for a way out. She had seen me. And at that moment, her desperation was visible. She dropped her glass, breaking the silence around her. He tried to hold her, but she pushed him away with a sudden movement. I didn't know what to do. Stay and face the shame. Run away and let it haunt me forever. I can explain, she tried to say, her voice trembling, but unable to break through the barrier of stares fixed in her direction. You can explain what? My own voice surprised me, hoarse, charged with something between pain and anger. She didn't answer. She just stood there, trying to put together words that would never come. All she could do was maintain that pleading look that only increased my humiliation. Across the hall, her lover stood motionless, now a statue of shame and fear. His name, previously unknown to me, hovered in the whispers of the people around me. The revelation of who he was only added fuel to the growing fire inside me. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a conspiracy, something that involved our social circle, our trust, our history. The video ended with an image of the two of them, laughing together, holding hands in a place I never knew she had visited. Silence took over the room again, but now it was heavy, laden with judgment. And there I was, in the middle of it all, feeling the weight of the hundreds of looks that alternated between pity and derision. I knew that night wouldn't end there. I knew that every moment of that humiliation would spread like fire across a dry field, burning away everything I believed to be true. But what I didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was how far that betrayal really went. How many layers were still hidden. And, most importantly, what would I do from then on? The clock in the hall seemed to have stopped, but the decision had to be made. Standing there, with all eyes on us, I asked myself, who would be the first piece to fall in this game of dominoes they had created? Welcome to the channel where the truth about betrayal is exposed in gripping stories. Here, we don't support, condone or romanticize betrayal in any way. The stories are fictional, but they show how infidelity destroys lives, relationships and hearts. Get ready, because now you're going to hear a shocking story, full of emotion and twists and turns. Good story. The clock struck 7 in the evening when Daniel entered the house, carrying 2 bags full of ingredients for dinner. The smell of rain still hung in the air, mixed with the fragrance of waxed wood from the furniture. He felt an immediate comfort when he crossed the threshold and heard the familiar sound of running water in the kitchen sink. There was Helena, on her back, wiping down a dish with precise, methodical movements. It was a common scene, but one he always enjoyed. Helena had something that attracted glances effortlessly, a delicate beauty, but marked by strong features. Her dark hair fell loosely to her shoulders, and the way she frowned when she was concentrating revealed a meticulous woman, attentive to detail. Her appearance, however, was only the surface. Helena was a woman of sharp intelligence, something that had captivated Daniel from the moment he met her, years ago, at a business event where she was a guest. For him, life with Helena was stable, secure. Their marriage was like firm ground on which he could stand without fear of the ground giving way. Or so he thought. With a smile, Daniel placed the bags on the worktop and said, "I've brought the things for the risotto. Do you want to open the wine while I start?" Helena turned around with a slight curve to her lips, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Daniel noticed, but decided not to comment. Over the last few months, the moments of disconnection between the two seemed to be increasing. Nothing alarming, just small cracks that he attributed to everyday tiredness. She picked up a glass, poured the wine and handed it to him before disappearing upstairs, saying she needed to sort something out on her cell phone. Daniel remained in the kitchen, chopping onions and preparing the ingredients while his thoughts wandered. He remembered with nostalgia the time when dinners were livelier, filled with laughter and long conversations on any subject. Lately, the meals had been silent, and Helena's answers were short, as if she was always somewhere else. Despite this, he preferred to believe that they were phases. After all, every relationship goes through moments of monotony. While the risotto began to bubble away in the pan, Daniel took the opportunity to prepare the table. He always liked details, napkins neatly folded, candles lit, little gestures that made Helena smile. He believed that these gestures, however simple, were like glue for the pieces that were beginning to fall apart. When Helena came downstairs, the table was set, but her cell phone was still in her hands. "I told you it would be quick, but you know Patricia," she said with a weak laugh. "She won't stop talking. It's good to know she still has news." He tried to sound relaxed, but the annoyance was palpable. Who was really taking up Helena's time? He pushed the thought away. Paranoia never helped. Helena stared at Daniel as he served the risotto. The silence between them seemed to echo more than the sound of cutlery against plates. She knew he was noticing the changes. Daniel's gaze, once full of confidence and admiration, was now marked by a hint of uncertainty. It bothered her, but she didn't know how to fix it. Helena liked the life they had built together. The large house with windows that let the light in generously, the mutual friends, the plans for trips that never seemed to get off the ground. But there was something inside her that no longer found space in that stability. A restlessness that she didn't know how to explain, not even to herself. When he asked about her day, she gave generic answers. She told him about meetings at work, about a new idea for a project she was leading. Daniel listened, but she sensed that he was waiting for something. Perhaps a confession, perhaps a truth that she herself didn't yet have the courage to face. After dinner, while Daniel washed the dishes, Helena went to her office. She sat down in front of her computer and opened a folder of old photos. They looked so happy in all of them. Weddings, birthdays, holidays. Everything seemed perfect. But in the back of her mind, something always seemed out of place, as if an element she couldn't name was missing. A notification on her cell phone made her jump. She looked at the device as if it were a bomb about to explode. She sighed as she read the message and quickly deleted it, as she had been doing for the last few weeks. Daniel came into the office after a while, carrying 2 cups of tea. He put one of them on the table next to her and leaned over to kiss her head. "You work too much. You need to rest early today." She smiled automatically, but his gesture of affection made her feel a weight on her chest. A weight that grew with each passing day. Over the next few days, their routine continued unchanged. Helena left early for work and Daniel stayed at home, as he was completing a freelance project. He used the time to take care of the garden, organize accumulated papers and make small repairs to the house. Small details that showed how dedicated he still was to the home they shared. However, he couldn't ignore the growing sense of distance. Every phone call Helena received seemed to become a secret. Every message she deleted before he could ask her anything was a reminder that something was out of place. But he forced himself not to speculate. He trusted her, or wanted to believe that he still could. One Friday evening, Helena casually mentioned that the company was organizing a party. Daniel offered to go with her, but she declined with a nervous smile, saying that it would only be a small celebration, with no need for chaperones. He didn't insist, but something in her tone bothered him. On the morning of the party, Daniel got up early, determined to work in the garden. He needed something to distract him. He didn't yet know that that night would be the start of a series of events that would completely change the course of their lives. The day of the party arrived like any other, but there was something different in the air. Daniel sensed it from the moment Helena walked out of the door, hurried and with a smile that didn't look familiar. It wasn't exactly a smile of happiness, but of nervousness, like someone trying to look natural but hiding a secret. He tried to ignore it, to convince himself that it was just the normal stress of work. But the discomfort remained. He spent the day restless, alternating between the television and small repairs to the house that no longer needed to be done. Everything seemed like an excuse to fill the silence that echoed in the room. The house, which had so often been a refuge, now seemed suffocating, full of questions he didn't know how to answer. He found himself checking his phone more often than he'd like to admit, waiting for a message that never came. In the evening, when Helena didn't hear from him, a decision began to form in his mind, albeit hesitantly. Helena, on the other hand, was at the center of a very different environment. The hall rented for the company party was spacious, decorated with golden tones and lighting that oscillated between elegant and excessive. She moved around the venue with the calculated confidence of someone who knew how to be noticed without attracting attention. She wore a black dress that outlined her figure and discreet earrings that sparkled under the lights. Music filled the space, mixed with the sound of voices, laughter, and toasts. On the outside, she was the picture of composure. Inside, her mind was racing. The same nervousness she had felt when she left home now turned into a tightness in her chest. She looked around for someone in the crowd, but the gaze that met her first was not the one she had expected. It was that of a work colleague, who approached with a glass of champagne and comments on the success of the evening. Helena responded with smiles and nods, but her eyes continued to wander around the room. She finally spotted him. He was on the other side of the room, near the bar, holding a glass while chatting to a small group. His presence was magnetic, even in such a crowded environment. When their gazes met, she felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. He smiled, a smile that seemed to know more than it should, and started walking towards her. "I thought you weren't going to show up," he said, low enough for no one else to hear, as he bent down to greet her. "I told you I'd come, didn't I?" Helena replied, keeping her tone casual, but with a tremor in her voice that only he noticed. He laughed and held her hand for a moment, a touch that was brief but full of meaning. Helena pulled her hand away quickly and looked around, making sure no one was paying attention. There was no apparent danger, but the fear of being seen was already making her question her decision to be there. The clock in the hall seemed to be ticking too slowly. Meanwhile, Daniel was already on the move. He had decided to go to the party, even though he wasn't invited. It wasn't like him to act impulsively, but something drove him. It wasn't jealousy, but a need to understand. He needed to see for himself what was going on, even if he didn't know exactly what he was looking for. He got dressed quickly, grabbed his car keys and drove in silence, trying to calm the thoughts that were struggling to get out of control. When he arrived, he parked in an inconspicuous spot and walked to the entrance. He was greeted by curious looks from some of the company's employees, but no one questioned his presence. He recognized a few faces, colleagues of Helena's who had visited his home at previous dinners. He greeted them politely, keeping to the edge of the room where he could observe without being noticed. The room was vast, illuminated by lights that moved in sync with the music. Daniel looked around, searching for Helena. He soon found her, in the center of the hall, with the same man he had noticed in photos from previous events. The man looked comfortable next to her, leaning in as if they shared a secret. Helena's laugh, which he loved so much, sounded different now. It sounded lighter, almost nonchalant, but with an invisible weight that Daniel felt like a punch in the stomach. He remained motionless, unable to look away. His hands involuntarily clenched into fists. A wave of emotion washed over him, anger, sadness, doubt. He didn't know which one would overwhelm him first. Before he could decide whether to approach, the lights in the hall began to dim, drawing everyone's attention to the big screen. Helena froze as she heard the sound of the microphone being adjusted and the animated voice of the master of ceremonies announcing a special tribute. She knew there would be videos of the team, photos of relaxed moments in the office. But something inside her screamed that this was no good. She felt her heart racing and instinctively looked at the man next to her, who seemed equally apprehensive. The first images were harmless, smiles, hugs, team achievements. But then the screen went dark for a moment, and what appeared next made the whole room hold its breath. A shaky video, apparently recorded amateurishly, showed Helena at dinner, smiling at the man next to her. He poured wine for her, while their fingers touched in an intimate way. The images continued, like fragments of a story that neither of them had allowed to be told. Helena felt the world spin as her breathing became heavier. The video ended with the two of them laughing together, and then the room fell silent. For a moment, no one seemed to know what to say or do. Everyone looked at the screen, then at Helena and the man next to her. Daniel felt as if the floor had disappeared. He looked at Helena, waiting for her to do something, to say something. But she remained motionless, her face a mixture of shock and despair. He took a step forward, but stopped, unable to decide what he should do. In the center of the hall, Helena felt everyone's gaze burning into her skin. But what terrified her most was Daniel's gaze, which was now fixed on her. She knew in that instant that nothing she could say would erase what he had seen. The only thing left now was the impact of the consequences. The silence in the hall seemed eternal. Daniel, still standing in the same spot, felt the weight of the betrayal pulsing through his mind and chest like a storm. Every second seemed to drag by, as if time was bending over him. The images from the video remained etched in his memory, her laughter, the touch on the other man's arm, the complicity that should never have existed. It all seemed unreal, but there it was, undeniable. Helena moved first. She took a step towards Daniel, her eyes pleading and her hands trembling, but without saying a word. There was nothing she could say to erase what he had just seen. Nevertheless, her voice finally broke the silence. "Daniel, please let me explain." He raised his hand, a gesture that instantly silenced her. His eyes, normally so serene, were now filled with something Helena had never seen before, disappointment and pain. "Explain," said Daniel, his voice low but full of bitterness. "Explain what?" "The images have already explained everything." Helena looked around, realizing that everyone was still watching. The gossip began to spread like wildfire, whispers and curious looks consuming what was left of her dignity. The man next to her, who had been in the video, took a step back, as if to disappear, but his presence only made the moment even more awkward. "Not here," she begged. "Let's talk somewhere else. Please." Daniel hesitated. Part of him wanted to run away from that place, leave the hall and all the embarrassment behind, but anger kept him trapped. He nodded, but not before casting a direct glance at Helena's lover, who immediately looked away. "In the parking lot. Now." Her voice was firm, and he turned without waiting for her. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, but that did nothing to calm Daniel's fury. He stopped beside his car, crossing his arms as he waited for Helena to catch up. She came slowly, hesitantly, with her arms crossed as if to protect herself from the judgment she knew would come. When they finally reached his side, she tried to speak, but Daniel was quicker. "How long?" he asked, staring straight at her. His voice was cold, almost controlled, but his eyes betrayed the whirlwind of emotions. Helena opened her mouth, but couldn't make a sound. The weight of everything she was hiding seemed to crush her. When she finally managed to answer, her voice was almost a whisper, "A few months." Daniel took a step back, as if her words had physically hit him. "A few months," he laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "And you managed to hide it all the time? Make me believe that we were fine? That everything was normal?" Helena tried to move closer, but he held up his hand again, stopping her. "I never wanted this to happen, Daniel. I felt lost." "It's not an excuse, but, it really isn't," he interrupted, his voice cutting. "Because nothing justifies it. Nothing justifies what you did. You destroyed everything." She remained silent, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to say something, anything that could ease his pain, but she knew there weren't enough words. For a moment, Daniel looked at her as if he was about to explode, but then something changed. His shoulders slumped, and he took a deep breath, trying to find control in the midst of the chaos. "What about him? Who is he to you?" he asked, his voice now more restrained, but still full of pain. Helena hesitated again, but knew she couldn't lie. "He's someone from work. Just someone who was there when I was vulnerable." Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "Vulnerable? You were vulnerable? What about me? Do you know what that does to me? Knowing that while I thought I was building something for us, you were destroying everything behind my back." Helena looked down, unable to face him. But Daniel wasn't finished. "And what else are you hiding?" He took a step towards her, his voice becoming lower, but with an intensity that made her heart soar. "Because I don't believe that's it." Helena looked up, and in that instant he knew. There was something more. Something she was afraid to say. Her silence was enough to confirm it. "Just say it, Helena." Daniel crossed his arms, waiting. Helena tried, but the words stuck in her throat. The confession he sought was far greater than anything she could explain. Daniel took a step back, his gaze still fixed on her. And then, in a tone that sounded more sad than angry, he said, "You've already destroyed our marriage, Helena. But it seems you haven't finished destroying me yet." Helena remained motionless as Daniel walked away, each of his steps seeming to weigh more than the last. The distance between them wasn't just physical, it was a chasm that seemed impossible to cross. She felt hot tears slide down her cheeks as her mind struggled to process what had just happened. The air in the parking lot was freezing, but the feeling of cold came from inside her, an emptiness that now seemed to consume everything. Daniel stopped beside the car, his hands firmly resting on the roof as his panting breath condensed in the night air. He felt as if the world was falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The betrayal was already an almost unbearable blow, but Helena's hesitation at his final question had planted a seed of something even worse, doubt. He slowly turned to face her again. There was no longer anger in his eyes, only exhaustion. "You're not going to tell me, are you?" His voice sounded firm but broken, like a distant echo of someone who was once whole. Helena shook her head almost imperceptibly, unable to find words. Daniel laughed, a bitter, humorless laugh, as he crossed his arms. So that's it. He looked up at the sky as if searching for some divine answer, but all he found was emptiness. You have nothing more to say. She tried to move closer, but he stepped back, raising one hand to stop her. No. Don't do that. Don't pretend you care now. You had your chance, Helena. You had every chance to tell me the truth. But you chose this. He made a vague gesture, indicating everything around, the scandal, the shame, the chaos. She took a step back, as if his words had a physical weight. There was no rebuttal. He was right. She had chosen it, even if she didn't fully understand why. The next few minutes passed in silence. Helena, still standing still, saw Daniel open the car door, but he didn't get in immediately. He stood there, looking at her over his shoulder, as if waiting for something, anything, to convince him to stay. But she remained motionless, a prisoner of her own guilt and paralyzed by uncertainty. Daniel got into the car and slammed the door hard, the sound reverberating through the empty parking lot. The engine roared as he accelerated out of the car without looking back. Helena stood there, alone, the cold finally reaching her skin and leaving her shivering. The sound of tires disappeared into the distance, and she felt the crushing weight of loneliness. Daniel drove aimlessly, his hands tightening on the steering wheel as thoughts collided in his mind like waves in a storm. He wanted to hate her. He wanted to erase every memory, every moment he had shared with her. But at the same time, a part of him still sought to understand. He still longed for answers. How could someone he knew so intimately have kept so much from him? Anger gave way to sadness, a sharp pain that seemed to pierce his chest with every kilometer. He finally stopped at a deserted gas station, resting his head against the steering wheel. For a moment, silence was his only companion, until a flash of memory hit him. He remembered the morning of his birthday, months ago, when Helena had prepared a special breakfast for him. The way she had smiled as she placed the cup of coffee in front of him, as if it were just another ordinary day. Now he saw it differently. He wondered if her lover had been part of their lives back then. Every shared memory seemed contaminated now, tainted by doubts he would never be able to answer. He looked at the phone on the passenger seat. Part of him wanted to call someone, to vent, to seek support. But who? Friends? Family? He didn't want to carry anyone into his maelstrom. So he just stood there, staring at the blank screen, until a new message arrived, breaking the silence. It was from Helena. Just 3 words, "Please come back." Meanwhile, Helena remained in the parking lot, sitting on the sidewalk with her arms around her knees. She felt small, insignificant, as if she were just another figure in the crowd, waiting for the inevitable judgment. The message she had sent Daniel was her last attempt to save something that seemed lost. She knew it wasn't just about betrayal. It was deeper than that. It was about years of silent dissatisfaction, of unspoken words, of desires buried under the facade of a perfect marriage. She loved Daniel. That much she knew for sure. But her love seemed insufficient in the face of the decisions she had made. The sound of footsteps brought her out of her thoughts. She raised her head and saw someone approaching. It was the man who had been standing next to her at the party. He looked nervous, as if he was also carrying the weight of the evening on his shoulders. "Helena, we need to talk." His voice was urgent, but low, as if he feared being overheard. She stood up slowly, crossing her arms. "Not now." "I can't," she began, but he interrupted her. "It's not about us. It's about him." He gestured towards the direction where Daniel had disappeared. "He needs to know the truth." Helena's eyes widened and a shiver ran down her spine. "No, he doesn't." Her voice came out firmer than she expected. "This is none of your business." No. He took a step closer, his eyes fixed on hers. Do you think you can hide it forever? Do you think you won't find out? You have to tell him. Helena looked away, unable to face him. The truth he mentioned was like a weight that threatened to crush her. And she knew that, regardless of her choices, the revelation would come. It was only a matter of time. Hours later, Daniel finally returned home. The door was unlocked and the living room lights were still on. He entered slowly, as if the house had become strange territory. On the sofa, Helena was waiting, her eyes red and her face tired. He stopped in the middle of the room, crossing his arms. I read your message. And I came back. His voice was firm, but without the anger of before. Now, you're going to tell me what you're hiding. Helena took a deep breath, gathering the courage she needed to speak. But the words didn't come. And in that suffocating silence, they both realized that the final confrontation was yet to come. The silence hung heavy in the room. Daniel remained still, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Helena, who was still sitting on the sofa. The tension was palpable, as if the very air around them was about to break. She knew there was no escape. The truth she had avoided for so long was about to come out, and with it, everything that remained of what had once been their marriage. I'm waiting, said Daniel, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Helena looked at him, her eyes filled with tears and exhaustion. There were no more excuses, no more defenses. With a tremor in her voice, she began. It wasn't just the betrayal, Daniel. I know this is already more than you can bear, but, she swallowed, fighting the urge to look away. The man you saw in the video, he's not just a lover. He's... She hesitated, and Daniel stepped forward, his expression hardening. Speak up, Helena. Don't torture me any more than you already have. She took a deep breath before releasing the words. He's someone I knew before we got married. Someone who I loved. Before you. The revelation hung in the air, but Daniel didn't seem shaken. He just waited, knowing that that wasn't all. When we started dating, I was already pregnant with him. The words came out quickly, as if they would be less painful if said all at once. And I never told you. I let you believe that you were the father. Daniel's world seemed to stop. He stood still, as if the impact of those words had frozen everything around him. The revelation was so unexpected, so devastating, that he didn't know how to react. What? He finally managed to say, his voice lower than he expected. You're telling me that our son, he stopped, correcting himself. My son, he was never mine. Helena shook her head, tears now running freely down her face. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I fell in love with you, Daniel. You were everything to me, and her voice failed her, and she couldn't finish the sentence. Daniel took 2 steps back, as if he needed to distance himself from her to absorb the blow. Everything he had believed to be true, all the memories they had shared, now seemed like a cruel lie. Does he know? Daniel asked, referring to the man he had seen next to her in the video. Helena nodded, unable to speak. For how long? Daniel insisted, his voice becoming firmer. A few months ago. He turned up at work, and that's when it all started. Daniel felt a wave of anger rise up again, but this time it was mixed with something deeper, an overwhelming sadness. He didn't know how to deal with the fact that his whole life had been built on a lie. He didn't know whether to hate Helena or simply regret what they had lost. Hours later, Daniel left the house. He drove through empty streets, still trying to process everything. In a moment of impulse, he stopped in front of his older sister's house. She had always been the voice of reason in his life, and he needed someone to listen to him. When she opened the door, one look was all it took for him to know that something terrible had happened. As Daniel vented, his sister listened to him in silence, her eyes brimming with tears at the pain he was clearly feeling. When he had finished, she held his hands and said, "Daniel, what you do from here on in will define who you are. Not for her, not for him. But for you. You can choose to carry this pain and let it destroy you, or you can choose to leave it behind and find something that really makes you happy." These words stayed with him as he walked home, where Helena was still waiting. But something inside him had already changed. Over the next few days, the breakup became inevitable. Daniel asked Helena to leave the house, and she obeyed without protest. He also insisted that she reveal the truth to her son, who was now an adult. It was the least she could do to repair the damage she had caused. For Helena, shame and guilt were a constant burden. She withdrew from everything, including the man she had cheated on Daniel with. Their relationship no longer served any purpose, it was just a painful reminder of her wrong choices. Daniel, for his part, decided to rebuild his life. He quit the job that connected him to the past and moved to a new city. There, he found a small support group for people who have experienced devastating betrayals and lies. For the first time, he allowed himself to share his pain without fear of judgment. And little by little, he began to find a new purpose. Helena's son, now aware of the whole truth, faced his own internal battle. The revelation deeply shook his relationship with her, but he also understood that Daniel would always be his father, no matter what the blood said. In the end, each character faced the consequences of their choices. Daniel, although marked by pain, found a path to healing. Helena was left alone, living with the regret of her actions. And their son, torn between two worlds, decided to build his own life based on the honesty that had been lacking in his past. The story ended not with complete redemption, but with a powerful reminder: the choices we make, especially those based on lies, have the power to destroy everything around us. Did you like the story? Leave a comment and tell us what you thought of the outcome. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more stories like this. And remember, under no circumstances does this channel support any kind of betrayal. Here, we show how the wrong choices can devastate lives. See you next time.